Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on your location. My name is Mark Bellamy, and I'm Senior Advisor for Africa at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, in Washington. And I'm delighted that Mvimba Dizolele, the Director of the Africa Program at CSIS, has invited me to chair this panel discussion today. Our topic is Africa's economies amidst the energy transition, the case of Angola. And our guidebook for this discussion is the soon-to-be-published study by Mvimba entitled Angola, the Long Road Traveled and the Way Forward. Our panelists are three distinguished Angolan experts, thinkers, and doers. Sergio Calandugo is an academic and an activist with a special focus on development and international aid and cooperation issues. He is the founder of the Social Observatory of Angola. Carlos Rosario de Carvalho is a well-known Angolan economist, journalist, and radio host. Giza Gaspar Martins is regional director of a renewable energy company, Sun Africa. He is the former chair of the Least Developed Nations Group at the UN and a former director of the African Development Bank. So welcome to our Angolan colleagues, and thank you very much for joining us today. As all of you know, Angola is a major oil-producing nation, second in Africa only to Nigeria. And Angola has been exporting oil to international markets for almost 60 years. Angola also has green energy ambitions and is rich in renewable energy potential. So whether, when, and how Angola makes a transition to a less carbon-intensive future is a topic I hope we might be able to touch on today. I also hope we can explore the socioeconomic and political context of Angola today, and in particular, the ambitions and the performance of the Angolan government under President João Lourenço, who was first elected in 2017 and re-elected to office in 2022. So with that little bit of opening there, I'm going to turn to Mvimba to get us started today with a preview of the long road traveled and the way forward. And after that, each of our three guests will make brief opening remarks, that will be followed by a panel discussion. And then towards the end of the hour, we will open up to questions from the room. Those with questions are asked to put them in the chat, and I will be able to select questions from the chat to put to our panelists. So thank you, and Mvimba, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bellamy, and thank you, Giza, Sergio, and Carlos for joining us today. This report is a product of research in the field. Angola is an important country. Ambassador Bellamy, you just mentioned that. The second largest oil-producing country on the continent. Big population, big land mass. Angola is also peculiar because within the African context, very few countries struggle with conflict the way Angola did. 27 years of civil war, and before that, a few other years of independence war. And so the country only really started becoming a traditional country, quote unquote, in 2002 when the war ended and the various warring factions came together as fellow citizens of the same country trying to hammer out a way forward. And that, of course, is never easy. It's not easy when countries and people have been fighting have to lay down the guns and start talking as policymakers, as leaders. A country as diverse as Angola, ethnically, socially, and regionally. But so that has been a very important part of Angola moving forward. And it's not been easy because it has meant that Angola has to strengthen its democratic processes. It means that Angola also, with the end of the war, had embraced a transition to liberal economy. As we know, market economy. Angola for a long time had been a communist country, one of the few on the continent that literally claimed to be a communist country in that way. It's also now a question of how Angola moves forward, consolidating the reconciliation process, the fruit of reconciliation. Again, none of those tasks can be easy. We also know that because of the war, Angola had an infrastructure that was destroyed, bridges, roads. The Benguela Railroad that everybody's talking about with the Lobito corridor today was actually destroyed. So as Angola wanted to rebuild after the war and turn to the traditional institutions, the lenders, the IMFs of the world, the World Banks of the world, those institutions, or the private sector for that matter, were not always ready to help Angola. After all, the cost of capital in Africa is very high, has always been. The risk factor is determined by institutions that are not Africa-based, never work in favor of African countries. So Angola eventually turned to China. Took a lot of money, a lot of debt from China to rebuild the infrastructure. All that was happening, of course, as the late president, José Eduardo Santos, was extending his hand to the West, particularly the United States, to rapprochement. The two countries had fought on different camps of the Cold War. And in Angola, they like to say, I was reminded when I was on the ground there, that the Cold War in Angola was very hot. And I think it was very hot for a long time. So there's the President Dos Santos trying to bridge the gap with the United States. The United States, of course, meeting Angola where Angola was, embassies reopening or embassies opening up, and the relationship building to where it is today. After President Dos Santos left, President João Lourenço came and furthered that rapprochement with the United States. But even before he became president, as Secretary of Defense, as Minister of Defense, had come to Washington, a highly mediatized event, meeting with then Secretary Mattis. That opening also comes with challenges. If you turning a ship as big as Angola, with the weight of the history that I just mentioned, it takes a long time to turn that ship. Then you face dynamics internal to the ruling party, the MPLA. How do the new changing dynamic affect the old caciques? What kind of resistance do you meet internally? What does that mean? What is the cost of the debt that Angola has gotten over the years? What does that mean as Angola then is transitioning to market economy when one of the biggest creditors of Angola is China? What does that mean? And then there is the weight of the history in a different way, which is the relationship between the northern provinces of Cabinda, Zaire, Rouge, and maybe Lunda Norte, who often are very, very resource rich, who have contributed greatly in the economy of Angola, but who don't always feel like they're getting the same trickle-down effect on the resources that they have. We then also talked about the way forward. How do we, Angola that is, how does a country like Angola, as the sons and daughters of Angola come together, how do they move forward, given all this weight of history that I just mentioned, to play the role that will strengthen national cohesion, and then two, so that Angola can continue playing the role that it needs to play. I will pause there and turn back to you, Ambassador Bellamy.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Nvimba. That's a very good outline of your paper. I'm going to turn now, in the order that I have received your names, to our to our guests, and maybe we'll start with you, Sergio, to ask for any thoughts or comments that you might like to offer in opening this up a little further.
Thanks a lot, Ambassador. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. It depends on the place where you are sitting. So, for me, I think that I want to start with the idea that time to time in Angola, we face a new world. As, for instance, the new world now become energy transition, and we are so proud of the potential of Angola. But it is not new for us. For instance, we come from the colonial times for the independence, new worlds. From the only one system part to multi-party, new world. From war to peace, new world. I remember that when we had economical growth, new world. Now the new world become energy transition. So the question is, how is it good for Angolans? So I think it is depend so much of what kind of vision for sustainable development we have in the country. I want to remark maybe 3 points on that. The first of all, energy transition, meaning that we achieve the goals of ending extreme poverty and promoting shared prosperity in our country. Energy transition, this new world, meaning that securing the long-term future for the country, it is people ensuring social inclusion. This new world, meaning emphasize the importance of economical growth, inclusion, and strong concern for equity, because that's our real problems. The model with we solve these problems, it's important, but we never forget, we cannot neglect that. For me, of course, that we have to invest more to change our economical model. We have to invest more to these energy transitions, but it is important that we don't take the lead. We cannot neglect the past lessons. And the past lesson is we have to be aware about what are the main or the potential environmental and social risk with this model. And we have to reserve time among us Angolan to discuss about that. Reserve time means that we have to concentrate how to avoid or mitigate the adverse impacts of those investments, what the people announced. What we can do to promote and work and community health and safety on that environment. How we can maximize the stakeholder engagement through enhanced consultation process and accountability. For me, that is important, not just the word, because as I told you, since our independence, time to time, the people offer us a new world, but this new world doesn't necessarily mean a good news. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, Sergio, for that really good suggestion that we consider the developmental aspects of what's being proposed here, not merely the economic ones. Let me turn next to I think next on my list is it Carlos? Yes, Carlos. Tell us what's on your mind.
Good afternoon in Angola. Good morning in the United States. I would like to concentrate my speech on the economy. Usually, Angola is presented as a oil-rich country and also diamond-rich country. But the fact is that diamonds don't count for our economy. We are an oil-dependent economy. But with a big difference from 10 years ago, for instance. You mentioned that we are the second producer in Africa, is true. But 6 years ago, we produced 1.8 million barrels a day. Now we are producing 1.1 barrels a day. So minus 700,000 barrels a day. But the population in to 2014 was about 45 millions. And now we are 35 billions. So there is a big difference. Okay, we are oil rich, not so rich as we were before. But we still are, our oil dependence is as it was before, but we are producing less and our population is much more, 10 millions more. But the problem of Angola, this oil dependence of Angola is not the problem. The problem of Angola is the lack of competitiveness. We are not able to produce goods and services outside oil with a quality and with a price that is competitive internationally. This is the problem of Angola. And it has been always the problem of Angola. We only can and we only now produce oil. And in fact, it's not Angola who is producing oil. We have the major companies, the major oil companies who are producing in Angola. So are the foreigners who are producing oil in Angola. And our problem, and Movember mentioned that we are before to make the transition, the energy transition, we must make the market economy transition because we don't have a market economy in Angola. We have a big state with a big intervention in the economy and with always playing a role that should not be the role of the state. The private sector in Angola has no room in Angola because the state is the state intervention is very, very big. So what we need a really market economy, and we don't have this market economy. For instance, take the case of oil and the fuels. We have the gasoline price in Angola is about 30 cents. It should be at least $1. You imagine it, 30 cents is the price per liter in Angola. We spend in subsidies more than $2 billion. More than $2 billion. This is more than we spend in education and health together. So it's unbelievable. And if you put our debt servicing, the debt service is about 60% of our budget. You know, so we need, for instance, also in the energy sector. You know, the price of electricity is subsidized. The water price also subsidized. We have also, so we don't have, in fact, one market economy, and this is the problem. Before the transition to before the energy transition, we need to have a market economy, and this depends on the government in order to have a really business, a friendly business environment, friendly for the private sector that we don't have in Angola for now. With the President Lourenço in 2017, there was an illusion about the future of Angola because the agenda of President Lourenço was to fight the corruption, to fight the monopolies, to increase democracy in Angola. But 7 years later, we didn't have this what he promised to Angola. There is Angola. The important in Angola, the people in Angola, and for instance, President Lourenço is more important than institutions. So there is a lot of things that we can do. For instance, we don't know yet if the President Lourenço will run or not for a third term. We know there's the Constitution. According to the Constitution, the President has only 2 terms, and now we don't know if President Lourenço wants or not to run for the third term. When people ask President Lourenço about that, he say that it's too early to speak about that, and we will see later. So my vision is that we need more democracy in Angola. For instance, I am a journalist, and the press is controlled by the government. The government has a monopoly in TVs. We don't have private TVs, or we have one private TV, but this private TV is owned by people close to the ruling party. So what Angola needs, in fact, is to increase the role of market economy and also to increase the role of democracy in Angola. And for the moment, that's all.
Thank you, Carl. You've given us a lot to consider there in our discussion. I had a hard time taking notes. There was so much to capture there. So thanks for that. And Giza, let's turn to you for your thoughts before we move into the panel discussion. Giza, take it away.
Thank you, Ambassador. Good afternoon to those of you in the US, and good morning to those of you in the US, and afternoon to us here in Angola or elsewhere in the continent. Ambassador, if you would allow, just it's not a correction, just an imprecision. I never was a director at the African Development Bank. There's a famous person that bears my last name, who I got it from, who was indeed a director at the ADB. I currently serve as a regional director for South Africa. I'll speak about that in a moment. And I come from an environment background. I served 12 years as a director in our Ministry of Environment here in Angola, dealing with climate policy issues as well as environmental policy and regulation in general. But to try to get back to our conversation, indeed, much has been said. It's tough to be the last one, but I guess a couple of things I would add, particularly on the energy side, and I think it would help lend some perspective on the sorts of policy dilemmas that any administration, any government would have in a country such as Angola, with the challenges that it has. Firstly, I think it's worth mentioning that oil, energy in general, has been a part of Angola's past, is certainly a part of Angola's present, and will be a part of Angola's future. At Sun Africa, where I serve as a regional director, we are dedicated to assisting governments and stakeholders in the African government, in the African continent, in overcoming what we call energy poverty, which is ensuring that there is access to reliable and renewable energy in the continent, and this is what we are doing here in Angola. We are proud to be responsible for the commissioning of Sub-Saharan Africa's largest solar PV plant here in Angola, an undertaking that was done during the COVID times. Angola, in the case of electricity, is electrified to the tune of 42% of the country. And that access to electricity is mostly ensured within main urban centers, the major urban centers. Just last week, we inaugurated, together with the Angolan government, a 26 megawatt power solar PV plant in northeastern Angola. And among the comments that we received from the local population was that the price of electricity was too high, that they could not afford to pay that precise tariff that Carlos just mentioned a few moments ago as being heavily subsidized. So I hope this lends a bit of perspective in the sorts of policy dilemmas that that this government and any future government will have to contend with. I would further dive a little bit or dwell a little bit on the energy side, because we are witnessing in Angola, particularly since 2017 or so, a decision to harness Angola's renewable energy potential. And that, in our view, is certainly worthy of mention, as it not only will ultimately culminate with the reduction of the bleeding of resources, hard currency resources in particular, that get devoted to subsidizing fossil fuel consumption as a result of, for the purposes of producing electricity or transportation or other needs, as well as it will, of course, ensure that a larger proportion of Angola's population has access to energy. Energy, in our view, is fundamental to the development challenge. It has been well documented by various entities, including Sustainable Energy for All, that a dollar invested in energy turns into significant gains in GDP per capita, as well as it enables the provision of certain goods and services, in particular, such as education, health, and other services that are certainly aligned with the development challenges that Sergio highlighted just before. Investment into energy will also, I think, enable the country to not only improve business conditions and create an enabling environment for investments, both by private entities and public ones as well, into further diversification of the economy. Energy alone will not do it. There's a number of other policies and measures that need to be enacted. But certainly, we view energy as being fundamental to this process. So I'll stop it there and wait for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giza, and thank you all for your very good introductory remarks. I'm not quite sure how we want to start this off. I do want to highlight something that Sergio said that I'd like us to keep in mind, which is that however Angola goes forward, or however it manages or doesn't manage an energy transition, the impact on ordinary Angolans should be taken into account, and the whole question of human development and how an energy transition or how any particular policy fosters human development should be a part of the calculation. That touches on something you were just saying, Giza, which is that energy is fundamental to development, and if people can't pay for the solar energy that's being generated in the Northeast, maybe the subsidy structure needs to be worked on, or maybe there are other solutions. But access to energy is very much a part of development. My question I'd like to maybe just throw out though to the group is, it goes to something that Carlos said, which is that there really needs to be a transition to a market economy, however you want to define that, before you can seriously talk about an energy transition. And, I go back to what I thought was President Lourenço's two top priorities after he was elected in 2017. The first was combat, as he said, corruption, nepotism, and impunity. And the campaign that he launched, I think, caught a number of people by surprise. And secondly, his intention to diversify and modernize the Angolan economy, and in particular to privatize large parts of the Angolan economy. These seem to be the two, at least as I read it, these seem to be the sort of two flagship efforts that he was making. And now we're 7 years later, and as several of you have remarked, the scorecard isn't that good. So what went wrong, if anything? Where does Angola stand today in terms of those goals and ambitions? And what might be next? I'll just throw that out to the three of you.
I don't know if I can say something about that. About the privatization program. The program started in 2019, and we are now in 2024. And the state is bigger now than it was before, because the government, they privatize small industries and etc. But now the main telecommunications company belongs now to the state, is Unitel. The state nationalized Unitel, the stake of Isabel dos Santos, and also the stake of General Dean. So Unitel now is 100% state-owned. When the government nationalized Unitel, he nationalized also the second bank in Angola, BFA, because Unitel has a stake of 51% in Unitel. Movicel, the second operator here in Angola, as the state has the majority in Movicel, and through the National Social Security Institute, the state has more than 50% of Movicel. In the case of the press, all the TV are state-owned are run by the government. So, as I told you, the state is now bigger than it was before the privatization process. So there is a rhetoric. There is the reality is totally different from the speech that we have. For instance, one of the biggest problems in Angola, I used to say that maybe the economy is a problem for Angola, but main problem in Angola is education. Okay, education and health also. And the government is always saying that they are investing in education, but the truth is completely different. I have been yesterday in a conference with the IMF about the sub-Saharan economies, the presentation of the report of IMF, and what we saw yesterday is that the expenditures in education were about 3% or 3.2% of the GDP. Now is 2.3% of GDP. So the effort that the Angolan government is doing with education is less than it was before. So we must invest in education and in health. There are the biggest problems. In the case of health sector, it's true that the government is investing a lot, new hospitals and etc. But when the elite, the Angolan elite, has some health problem, they go where? In Angola? No, they go outside of Angola. They go to Portugal, they go to South Africa, they go to Brazil. The main leaders of Angola, they die they die outside of Angola. Then they come to Angola, but they die all the President Agostinho Neto, the President José Eduardo Santos, and a lot of Angola leaders, they die outside of Angola because we don't have the necessary conditions in Angola. In Angola, all the people who can afford for it as their children outside of Angola to study. So one country who spends more in subsidizing diesel and gasoline than in education and in health is a country that there is no future for this country. This is my view.
Okay.
Thank you,
For
Carlos.
your questions, I think that there are two perspectives to see it. Maybe you can find it a bit philosophical, but for me, it is a fundamental when you want to do the reforms. I think that the first one should be, there are three elements you have to consider when you want to do this kind of reform and when you want to face the challenge. First of all, it's important to know what are your ability to do that. When I talk ability, it's not just those who sign the decree to change the issues. Also, all people are involved to implement this reform. Maybe it's a question of education, training, experience, but ability is important. The second is acceptance. Even we are so proud when we pronounce the word one people, one nations, but we have to know, to register that we have different interests in this country. We have different perspectives. So it is important also to building the acceptance. For instance, Carlos took a lot and gave us a very good example about what happened with the oil subsidized, not the subside of oil. So what level of acceptance this society have if the government say, okay, we'll stop it and let's take this money and so we have to building. In the many times we didn't use enough or we didn't invest enough to acceptance of some reform which are critically in the, it is important among us. That's meaning that we have to create space to dialogue, to discuss a bit more and to building a common understand about issues. The third one in this, my first perspective to see that is the authority. When I mention authority, maybe is the authority which comes from legitimacy. The people, because sometimes we have the formal one, authorities, but we have the substantial authorities, the people who really know that, okay, you are the right person, you are the right institution, you are the right to conduct us in this challenge, what we're facing now. This is one way to see that. The other way should be more simple. That even we mention, when we pronounce, okay, we do the energy transition, we do the economical reform, inside of this world, there are multiple transitions what we need. It's not, even if we pronounce, okay, it is economical reform or economical model. Inside of that, there are political, social, environmental. There are multiple aspects what we cannot presume or pretend to do this reform, neglect some of the social, environmental, other risks which are inside of this kind of reform. And because sometimes we try to put emphasis on the regulatory framework, the policy framework, but we neglect the capacity, human capacity to do that. Sometimes we invest in the human capacity to do this reform, but we neglect the framework. So that is the second perspective. So how we do that, I think that is issues we can building it together. That is the reason why I insist that the need to invest more in stakeholder inclusive discussions, stakeholder participation, to building that. The challenge is so big for us to leave only one perspective to deal what we have to go. Thanks.
Thank you, Sergio. Giza, I have a question from the audience for you, but if you would like to follow on to Sergio's comments there, please go ahead.
I'll just add a couple of things. One is more by way of comment, and it's more probably directed at you. I don't think the appropriate question is what went wrong. I think the more appropriate question is, what lessons have we learned from what has happened in Angola over the last 8 years or so? And I of course, this is a sector in which I am involved now these days. So I go back to it because not only it's safe, but it also highlights a little bit. It helps bring perspective to the challenges that the country faces. Right, electricity in particular is a sector that is, of course, we must first accept that is heavily regulated everywhere in the world. Right. With a country such as Angola, with 7 years ago, the penetration of electricity was much less, but today 42%. It is, for lack of a better word, very ambitious to believe that market forces alone would cater to the needs of providing electricity access to the rest of this country, right? So, in my view, there is no other way of increasing the rate of penetration of access to electricity in the country, unless, of course, the state becomes heavily involved in investments. This is tied up to fossil fuel subsidies, to that issue and that question. We've gone through, and this speaks to the lessons learned. This government has tried at least twice to begin to incrementally remove fossil fuel subsidies, only to have to go back. I mean, we've now, I think over the last month or the month before, we just got a signal in the removal of fossil fuel subsidy direction again, with regards to gasoline. But I mean, we have to understand that for every policy objective, there will be trade-offs, right? And I appreciate the position in which some of those decision makers are, by way of the trade-offs and the consequences, such as some of the unintended ones that Carlos mentioned with regards to telecom and media in Angola. Certainly, the outcome may not be consistent with the direction in which we were told the country would be moving. But what alternatives were there? Thank you.
Thank you, Giza. And you have answered the question from the audience. I think pretty much answered the question from the audience, but I'm going to read it to you anyway. And in case there's something else that you would like to add to what you just said. And this question is, how can energy access and affordability be improved for all Angolans, especially in rural and underserved areas? Is there anything you'd like to add to what you just said in casting a little light on that question?
I will add just a little perspective, or a little component that I think needs to be kept in mind, and that is that sometimes access is more important than anything else, right? Until you achieve a degree of concentration that enables you to start considering other objectives. I don't think it is adequate, right? So in Angola, we have a tariff for electricity that is prohibitive for the private sector to be involved. We have a renewable energy association that has been fighting very hard to be able to participate in a more meaningful way in current projects that are underway in Angola for increasing the capacity, the generation and distribution capacity of electricity in the country. But the rates are such that become, that make for non-bankable projects, not an attractive sector for the private sector at this stage, right? But I think that in this current situation, the most important policy objective should be to increase significantly the rate of access to electricity. And once that concentration is much higher, then we can consider other policy objectives. But access is paramount, and of course, we are lucky that in Angola, due to its environment, energy can most efficiently be produced through or from renewable sources such as hydro, solar, and even wind. So, of course, Sergio would agree with me that it should be renewable energy that needs to be produced in countries such as Angola. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that, Giza. I have another question here I'm going to ask all of you to maybe comment on. I go first to Sergio, however, on this question. And here it is. To what extent is the Lourenço government legally addressing alleged acts of corruption within his administration during his tenure, as opposed to targeting dos Santos associates and relatives? How would you assess his administration's record on this front?
I have no doubts that the President João Lourenço, in the beginning of this mandate, he make a serious effort to fighting against corruption. I think that was for the first time in my life. I am a bit young in Angola, but I think that was the first time the president recognized publicly that okay, there are a lot of corruption. The corruption is the main cause of development in Angola, and he say on that time that okay, we had against corruption. Even in the first will be affect people from my own party. On that time, I think that the level of popularity of the president was so high, and he pronounced it. My little concern is regarding how they do that, what kind of strategy. So that is the reason why I mentioned before. My learning from this process is that if you just put emphasizing law, policy, and regulation, but we don't create institutional capacity to deal with, so you will be not very well succeeded. If you ask me, okay, how effective was the fighting against corruption? I think that maybe we didn't achieve the main goal. The main goal is ending corruption, and we didn't ending it. Why? Because we invest so much in the strong men to fighting that, but we didn't invest in the institutions, because from my point of view, we have to create an institution which are strong enough, capable to deal with issues, and our institutions are very, very, very weak. I think our regulatory policy and the framework, institutional framework, cannot deal with those kind of issues. That is the reason why we face a lot of contradiction. The last year, it's become more evident on it.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. Any other comments on this particular question before we go to another?
I would like to say something about corruption. Just one number. More than 90% of public contracts are awarded directly to some companies. You know, more than 90% of public contracts are delivered directly to some companies. And most of the times they are the same companies who are awarded with these contracts. As you know, the rule is the public tender. The public tender should be the rule, but and the exception was to awarded directly the contracts, and more than 90% of the contracts are awarded directly to some companies in Angola.
Yeah, that's a noteworthy statistic. Thank you, Carlos. I have another question here. I've actually several questions, but we're gonna run out of time here. So this may be the last question. If not, maybe we can fit one more in. But this is a question to whoever would like to take a shot at it. What is the status of the emergent national security law? In what ways does it expand police security agency powers? And what may be its effects? I don't know if any of you have any views on that. That's a very important but a very specific question.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to interact with the several civil society institutions which face this new, I don't know if it's already law or proposal of law, that they think that it is a bit restrictive. The people are a bit afraid about those kind of issues. The main questions what the people raise is, what are the spirit of this proposal? Is the ensure security of law, is to protect the country, or is protect those who are in charge of the country instead to protect the overall nation? So it is real. And we have to be transparent. There are a lot of criticism about this law. For me, more the content of the law is the way what we in this country we create the law. I think that I want to insist on that. It is important to do it in a more participatory way, in more dialogue process, and in more inclusiveness way to produce this kind of law. I feeling that this is, unfortunately, is the award trends. I think in many countries, they are the trends that the states, institutions try to control a bit more the citizen, and our law is not so different. Unfortunately, I think that is something what, as a civic organization, we have to fighting for, because there are the risk that shrinking space for civil society and other authors.
Thank you. Thanks, Sergio. Nzimba, we have about 5 minutes here. I know you want to wrap up, but maybe time for one more question. This is a question that this is an issue actually that Nzimba explores in his paper, and I think it's a very important one. He alluded to it earlier, and this is the divide between North and South in Angola, and the disparity of the resource-rich northern provinces, and their where the contrast between the natural resource wealth and poverty is particularly acute, and then the better served, I guess I would say, southern parts of Angola, capital and southern provinces of Angola. Is this geographic and regional divide a serious problem for Angola? And is there recognition of this as a problem in the MPLA and in the government? And is there any prospect of trying to find a way to include these populations and allow them to participate and benefit more from whatever growth, whatever energy transition may occur, but whatever economic growth may occur in Angola? I mean, specifically, one of the things I've looked at recently are the prospects for some kind of reconciliation in Cabinda. I've concluded that maybe there isn't any good prospect for it. But what might be out there in the future in terms of closing this big divide, or is that simply too big an ask in Angola?
So I hope that doesn't talk too much. I don't know, Carlos, if you want to start, but I can start to say that I don't feeling in Angola there are a lot of inequity. The data, the official data say that. Of course, that in Angola there are a lot of discrepancy and we call asymmetries but it's more than rural, urban. I don't think they are not disparity in terms of south and north. It's more rural and urban. Is a lot. I think that the development try to concentrate more in the littoral zones. For instance, Benguela and even Cabinda receive significant more money from, for instance, if I compare with the Cabinda, which is in north, we compare with the Menong or Mushiku, which is in the east or south part of Angola. So I think, of course, that historically we are a lot of asymmetric regions. I remember many years ago, one of the word when MPLA present the election was, we have to grow, and after that we have to share better. My view should be opposite. We have to improve the way what we share the prosperity in order to have a good growth. So, but I think that it is really very. I hope and I'm feeling that the people recognize that there are a lot of asymmetry and we are an extremely unequal society. I think that it's difficult to widen this clear reality among us in Angola.
Thanks. Thank you, Sergio.
Maybe I can say something about this. As I told you in the beginning, the diamond sector is not important in Angola. The main sector is the oil sector. And the oil sector is in Cabinda and in Zaire province. And these provinces, as Luanda, were the province where the MPLA lose the elections. So I think that the election results, they say something about that. Because Cabinda and Zaire and Luanda were the province where the MPLA lose the elections. And the oil comes mainly from Cabinda and Zaire.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're about at the end of our time. I want to thank our panelists for their time this morning and for sharing their insights with us and for reminding us that there is a lot more that we need to talk about with regard to Angola, and I hope that we'll be able to do that again soon. I'm going to turn this back over to our real host, who is Mvimba Dizolele, and over to you, Mvimba.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bellamy, and thank you again, my friends, Sergio, Carlos, Giza, for taking the time to join us for this discussion. It's obvious that this is a big task to move Angola from where it was to where the people expect it to be. The issues are still the same that we started with. Acceptance, the type of regulatory framework and reforms that we put in place, what kind of stakeholder participation level that the country needs, and how we move that forward. The challenges of state intervention, which, if done properly, can move a certain direction. I think Giza mentioned the trade-offs, how challenging that can be also from the perspective of policymakers. But eventually, transparency and accountability remain the pillars of whatever Angola is trying to achieve in its transition from a war country to a peaceful country, from its transition from the old economic model to the liberal free market model. And that will mean the bidding process should be clear. It will mean laws should not be penalizing citizens and so on. But it's also clear that the government has tried a lot of things. GIZA is with Sun Africa, the groups like Sun Africa, AfriCell, and other investments where the government has guaranteed the process to move forward. So this is a challenging exercise. but this conversation is hopefully just the beginning. I also like to thank our audience, and also this project was made possible through a grant from Chevron, which also we appreciate. Thank you very much.